That was 15 seconds. 15 seconds out of the egg, and this animal is already running for its life. Not from a hawk, not from a snake, but from its own kind. So stay with me for the next few minutes, because I am going to show you something almost nothing else alive has to survive. A childhood spent running from the monster it is destined to become. This is how it works. The creature you just watched claw its way out of the ground and bolt for the nearest tree is a Komodo dragon, the largest lizard on the face of the earth. One day it will be 3 meters long, weigh as much as a grown man, pull down a water buffalo, and fear absolutely nothing that walks, swims, or flies. But right now, in this moment, it weighs about as much as a chocolate bar. It is barely longer than a pencil, and it is sprinting across open ground for its life, away from its own family. This is a scatter of dry volcanic islands in eastern Indonesia, Komodo, Rinca, Flores, a hard sun-hammered world of thorn scrub, dust, and bleached grass, where the water vanishes for half the year and nearly everything that moves is either hunting or being hunted, because this hatchling has no parent waiting for it. None. Its mother guarded the nest for months, but she left long before it ever hatched, and even if she were still standing over it right now, she would not be protection. She might be the threat. Komodo dragons do not raise their young. They do not feed them, defend them, or even recognize them as their own. From the second it split its shell, buried nearly 2 meters underground, this baby has been completely, utterly alone, and its very first task in life was brutal on its own, to dig upward through 2 meters of packed, sun-baked earth in total darkness, using nothing but a tiny egg tooth and 4 soft claws, a climb toward the surface that can take days, with no light to aim for and no air to spare. And when it finally breaks through into the daylight, it does not arrive in a safe world. It arrives in the single most hostile nursery in the animal kingdom. Because the #1 predator of a baby Komodo dragon is an adult Komodo dragon. On these islands, the grown giants are cannibals. Young dragons can make up as much as 1/10 of everything the big adults eat. Stop and picture that. The apex predator of this whole island, the thing nothing else on Earth dares to challenge, spends part of its life hunting its own children. This hatchling was not born into a family, it was born into a minefield built out of its own species. So how does something the size of your hand survive that? It goes up. The instant it is free of the ground, a baby Komodo does not run down to the shore or flatten itself in the grass. It heads straight for the nearest tree, and it climbs, and then it more or less stays up there. For the first years of its life, a young Komodo dragon is not a ground animal at all. It is a tree creature. It sleeps in the branches, it hunts in the branches, it hides in the branches, for one simple, beautiful reason. The adults cannot follow. A grown dragon is far too heavy to climb. Gravity is the only bodyguard this baby will ever have. The canopy is the one place on the entire island the monsters cannot reach, so the baby becomes an acrobat, and it does its growing up in the sky.
Up there it learns to be a hunter in miniature.
It chases insects along the bark, snaps geckos out of the leaves, raids birds' nests for eggs and chicks, and ambushes anything small enough to fit in its mouth. Every meal is also a lesson. The same patient, watchful, freeze and strike hunting it will one day use on animals 1,000 times heavier. It is serving an apprenticeship in the treetops, practicing on beetles, the trade it will eventually practice on buffalo. But the trees are not a perfect fortress. Sometimes a young dragon has to come down, to cross open ground, to reach fresh forest, to feed on something too big to catch alone. And when it does, it carries one last trick, and it is one of the strangest survival strategies on the planet. When a young Komodo approaches a carcass that the huge adults are already feeding on, it will often stop and roll, deliberately smearing itself in the reeking mess of the kill, coating its skin in the smell of guts and waste and rot. It makes itself smell like garbage, like something already dead, like nothing worth a second glance. A baby that stays alive by smelling like death itself, so that the giants standing shoulder to shoulder with it decide again and again that it simply isn't food. Quick thing, since you have come this far with our little dragon, and I am about to show you how it beat the odds before it was even born. If you want the next wild survivor like this one every single week, take 1 second and subscribe, and tap the bell. That is it. Now back to our fight to keep this baby alive, because it actually started months ago with its mother, and one of the most cunning tricks in the whole animal kingdom. because she faced an impossible problem. How do you hide a clutch of eggs on an island crawling with things that dig up and devour eggs, including other dragons? Her answer is pure deception. She often lays her real eggs inside the huge mound nest of another animal entirely, a chicken-like bird called a megapode, and then she digs several extra empty chambers scattered all around it. Decoys, fake nests, so that anything that comes hunting for eggs wears itself out on hole after empty hole, and with any luck, gives up before it ever finds the real one. Then she stands guard over the mound for months against the heat and the thieves, and then she too turns and walks away and leaves the eggs to finish the long 8 or 9 months of incubation completely on their own. And here is the fact that should genuinely stop you where you stand. A female Komodo dragon, stranded completely alone on an island, no male for 100 miles of open sea in any direction, can still produce a nest of healthy living young, with no father at all, on her own. It is a rare ability called parthenogenesis, and it means a single lone female, washed up on an empty scrap of land, can found an entire population by herself. Every baby she makes that way is a son, which leads to something almost unbelievable. One solitary female can drift ashore on a bare island, lay eggs that no male ever touched, hatch out a brood of sons, and years later breed with those very sons to fill the whole island with dragons. It is one of the strangest reproductive backdoors in all of nature, and it is very likely how these giants came to rule specks of land scattered right across the sea. For the rare young dragon that does survive, life becomes a slow, patient climb toward the top of the very world that once hunted it. Year by year it grows, from 100 grams to a kilo, to 10 kilos, to 50, to 90. And as it grows, it comes down out of the trees for good, because at last nothing left alive can swallow it. It grows a jaw full of curved, serrated, blade-like teeth. It grows venom glands set into its lower jaw, real venom, that keeps a victim's blood from clotting and quietly collapses its blood pressure, so that even prey which tears free of the first bite weakens, staggers, and goes down anyway. The creature that spent its entire childhood fleeing the giants and rolling in filth to stay off the menu, slowly, over years, becomes one of the giants. And the odds against ever reaching that point are steep. Out of a clutch of 20 or more eggs, only a small handful will survive those first exposed years on the ground and in the branches, past the snakes, the hawks, the wild boar, the civets, and above all of them, past the cannibal adults of their own kind. Most will not make it, but the few that do inherit the entire island. And there is a quiet, brutal symmetry to it. Every single enormous dragon lying in the sun with its eyes half closed, every cannibal that some new hatchling will one day have to outrun, was once that hatchling itself, was once a pencil-length scrap of a thing, sprinting for a tree, caked in stinking filth, terrified of the exact monster it has now grown up to be.
That is the strange, staggering truth of the Komodo dragon. It is not born at the top of its world.
It is born at the very bottom of it, the smallest, softest, most hunted thing on the whole island, and hunted hardest of all by what it is fated to become. Its entire childhood is one long escape from its own future, and the deadliest predator it will ever face is not the snake or the hawk or the boar. It is the adult it is destined to turn into, and the next tiny hatchling, somewhere out in the leaf litter tonight, already running from it. So if this one got under your skin, subscribe. There is a new wild survival story here every single week. And tell me honestly, down in the comments, if the most dangerous thing in your entire world was simply a grown-up version of you, do you think you would have made it to the trees in time? Because on an island tonight, a dragon the length of a pencil already has.